Hello, in this video we're going to go over the World War I simulation I designed. And I began this simulation uh, with a examination of a clip from All's Quiet on the Western Front, the one from the 1930s. And I wanted to get students to have the experience. The primary objective was to say, what was it like to be a soldier during World War I, and much as we can learn in like 30 or 40 minutes, and how easy was it to die or be severely wounded. So I played them a video, like I said, from All Quiet on Western Front, where you could see really how the defense had the advantage, yet there was lots of hand-to-hand combat, and that's why this is often called the last medieval war. And what's interesting is there's this officer who is actually acts responsibly. A lot of times in war movies, the officers leading the soldiers are portrayed as kind of dumb and as getting their soldiers killed. But here, this officer actually says, "Okay, we can't hold this trench. Let's retreat." And he's actually trying to save the lives of his men. And it's interesting. I point out that in the author Eric Remarque, who created this, who wrote this novel, All's Quiet on the Western Front, the officers are actually treated with respect. He clearly had good experience with officers. But basically, in the ending too, I had spliced together another clip of a soldier who was suffering from shell shock with this movie. So it wasn't just All's Quiet on the Western Front, and it was just to show what industrial warfare could do to you mentally. So there's all these pictures of people getting killed in the movie, but I also include this thing of a person, basically people who were impacted mentally and who had developed like facial tics and things like that. So I tell the students, okay, let's walk through this. So France is at war. You're called up for service. You're all members of the French Empire, and you are conscripts. You know, you've gone through reserve training. You're called up for service. And I wanted to include this image here just to give an idea of the soldiers. But I said I also emphasized that it's not just the French. France, as kind of a European nation, it's also the empire. So there's troops from West Africa, particularly from Senegal, who are being called up. And I thought these were really striking images. Here you have a Catholic nun almost embracing. She's got her arms around his backpack, but getting pretty close to embracing the Senegalese Muslim soldier, which I think is interesting. You have a Catholic nun, white Catholic nun, hugging a black African Muslim soldier. But the idea is that we're all part of the French Empire. That shows how powerful nationalism was. And here you've got Blaise Diagne, a very important African Senegalese who was part of actually the French National Assembly, and he's given a kind of pride of place there. So then to explain to the rules, I handed out these cards. Said, okay, this is your name, this is your job. You've got this many skill, this much luck, and I had made a mistake when I made the cards, and I said you need to change that 3 to 6. It should be 6. But the wounds are the same, and the idea was I wanted students to write on the cards, if you fill in all 3, you die. Now you could do the same thing with counters if you want, or you can design cards that people can write on. It all depends on your budget, and also whether you want them to have a souvenir. So I said, okay, you are now deployed to battle, and I very quickly tell the story about French soldiers at the Battle of Marne going into battle on in taxicabs, and that's what that is. And then I said, okay, and also you had the African soldiers being pulled up and brought to the battles in trains, and of course also the white soldiers too. But the key thing again, I wanted to really emphasize the imperial nature of this war. And then I started off talking about the difficulties of trench life. So people, they had a skill roll and a luck roll. So I want to just show that there's things you can control and things you can't control. Skill is what you can control. Luck is things you can't control. So I said, okay, living in a trench is difficult. It's easy to get sick. Make a luck check. If you have 3 or more successes, nothing bad happens. Remember, they had 6 dice. So if you have reasonable luck, you're going to succeed, right? You're going to get a 4, 5, or 6 on at least 3 of those 6 dice. So nothing bad should happen. But if you have bad luck, you lose a skill point. If you have only 1 success, your skill goes down by 2. If you have no successes, your skill goes down by 2, and you take 1 wound, right? And then I say, oh no, now you're attacked by gas. And here, the question is, can you get your mask on time? Well, that's a skill check. So you roll your skill, and then it's the same kind of rule. And you can repeat these. You just change. It's the same mechanic, but the skills are a little bit different, or the skin is a little bit different. So basically, it's almost the same rules. Number of successes. Remember, a success is a 4, 5, or 6. A failure is a 1, 2, or 3 on a d6. You get to roll 6, right? So most people are going to get at least 3 successes and not suffer. But you're going to have a few people who will suffer 1 wound, some people who will suffer 2 wounds, and I did have some people die because they weren't able to get their gas mask on. Then I wanted students to understand how, before the attack, you get gas, you get hit by artillery. The Germans are bombarding your position. Luck determines whether you get hit or not. And it's the same, almost the exact same rules. It's just I had a different description, right? And I had originally the rule that if you died, you had to sit out a turn. And I'm not sure if I would do that again. Basically, I wanted to show how this softened up and made you weaker. But I don't know if I want to have people miss out on a round, right? There's this question about realism versus engagement. But after this, I said the enemy is attacking. The Germans have launched a major offensive against your position. You open up on them with rifle fire, machine guns, and grenades. Make a skill check and count your number of successes to see how accurate your fire is. And then I count the successes, and I said, okay, the class, if you had a total of 30 or more successes, you were very successful. You eliminated a large number of German troops. If you had more than 20 but less than 30, you were moderately successful. If you had 20 or fewer successes, you were largely unsuccessful. And you can do the math, right? You can say, okay, if I've got 20 students and they're each rolling 6 dice or so, that's 120. They're probably going to have, this many successes with that, or they're going to have this few of successes. And you can use that to figure out, like, okay, what's an okay number of successes? What's a really good number of successes? However you want to do it, right? If you don't know, you just pick a number and just let it go. And and if things go really well, you're just like, wow, you guys are really good shots, because they're not going to sit down and do the math. The major thing is I want them to see that you weaken the opponent as they attack, and that impacts that they're still going to get to you probably, but what's going to happen is you're going to have hand-to-hand fighting break out. At this point, I tell students who were killed in the artillery barrage, hey, don't worry, reinforcements arrive, you can now participate. And I give them a new card. And I say, okay, here's a special skill check. If the class was significantly successful and limited a large number of German troops, 4, 5s, and 6s count as successes. If they were only moderately successful, only 5s and 6 counts as successes. The class was largely unsuccessful, only 6 counts as successes. And remember, I did that here. So you can figure that out that way. And I said, okay, if you have 3 or more successes, I decided that you're going to win, right? I'd already decided how the battle was going to go. The question was not how the battle's going to go. The question is, how are you going to survive the battle? So I said, okay, if you have 3 or more successes, right, you're rolling your skill check. If you have 3 or more successes, nothing bad happens. If you only have 2 successes, you take 1 wound. 1 success, you take 1 wounds. No successes, you were killed in the attack. And remember, though, there's different rules based on how well you did the previous fight. That determines how well you do this fight. Now I say, okay, you can rest and recuperate. You get to take a battle because troops were rotated out. And I explain this. I say, okay, you were rotated out. I say it was a difficult battle, but you were victorious in the end. Vive la France. You rotate out to rest. And I say you have the opportunity to do one. You can increase your skill by 1, increase your luck by 1, or heal 1 wound. So the students have a choice. And I give them like a minute or so to decide what they want to do. And I say, okay, now it's your turn to attack. And it's you run across no man's land while the Germans fire artillery, machine guns, and high-powered rifles at you. Make a luck check. Anyone who has 3 or 4 fewer successes, tell me, right? So 3 is kind of the magic number here. I let student roll 6 dice because 3 is kind of average. So I just said, okay, if you have 3 or fewer successes, because that's kind of average, 50%. And I tell them, draw a card and follow the instructions. So I say, okay, make a luck check. Anyone who had 3 or fewer successes, raise their hand. And I said, let me know if you die, because I put like a skull stamp on their card and I give them a new identity. And so you can see these are kind of cards you can instantly die, right? There was a group of cards that say you instantly die. Others say you have been shot and you're hit by shrapnel and you take 2 wounds. A bullet grazes you, you take 1 wound. And I tried to make things that were appropriate, like this is an artillery piece, shot in the head, skull. It's hard to find a good one for heart, so I chose this movie. And then basically I tell them, it takes a long time, and the Germans are still firing, right? You're running across this really long area. And so I let them do the same thing. And I usually have them do it 3 times. And I say, okay, you made it to the enemy's trench. Now hand-to-hand fighting breaks out. And I said, now it's a special skill check, only 5s and 6 counts, defenders, because the defenders have the advantage. And so then we have that same rule. So students are used to it by now. It goes pretty quick. And then I say, okay, you win, right? That's it. So I decided I wasn't interested in modeling the whole battle. So if you watch the Battle of Alesia simulation I did with the Romans, that was one where I did not decide the outcome of the battle. That's just how the students decide. But here, my goal was to simulate what it was like for individuals, right? So the goal here was to focus on individuals, and so that was the concern, was whether you survive or not. And so I asked students who died at any point. They had to raise their hands. I said, who had 2 wounds and who made it through with 1 wound or less? And if they died, I said, well, I gave them this card as a kind of reminder. And this is a French monument. If they had 2 wounds, I said, okay, you are severely injured. And I gave them these cards that show, these two show amputees, right? He's missing both of it. He's a double amputee. This African soldier is also or actually, I think he's only a single amputee. And this man has lost a portion of his face. Um, and then I said, okay, and if everything went well for you, I gave them this card with these nice postcards celebrating family and reunion. It says, you survived the war and returned to your family and friends. Now the task of rebuilding begins. And the idea was just to give students a sense of, okay, this is how vicious this war could be. Here's the aspects of this life, and just trying to humanize the soldiers. And it generally did, I think, a pretty good job of that. This is there's some simulations I feel like it needs a lot of work. This is one that I think went really well. And sometimes you get it right the first time. Other times you got to keep working on it.